Christian Amanpour from CNN the other day in an interview. I can't remember who exactly she was interviewing, somewhere. And so she said something like, we need journalists in Gaza. And yes, of course, we continue to call on Israel to allow international journalists in. But she was told, but there are journalists there. I mean, all of us see pictures, videos every day. And she said, no, we need Western journalists there. I think she said something like that.
Journalists are not on the ground in Gaza. And it is,
well, they're journalists on the ground. They're being killed.
You're right.
Yes.
You're right. I'm talking about independent Western journalists are not able to get...
Which tells you a lot about who is trusted as a journalist, who is seen as a journalist, whose life might be seen as protected. So what we have been, forced to do really is, first of all, to say these are journalists, right? This is not a political issue. This is a press freedom issue. For a long time, journalists were assumed to be outside of communities and coming in. Especially some established tropes of journalism struggle because that kind of dispassionate voice of journalism was meant to be assumed by you being external. And so when someone is embedded within the community, and I come from South Africa, and I'll tell you that this is a problem. It's as much a problem in Gaza as it has been a problem in South Africa, because for a long time, journalists were assumed to be a white man who came into a poor black community and then said, this is what's happening here. And then we retreat back to our spaces. This is fundamentally why journalism has also been suffering in many contexts, because people don't feel heard, they don't feel seen, they don't recognize themselves in the stories that are being told. I've just come back from Sarajevo, where the IPI had their World Congress, and Yumna Al-Saeed, the Al Jazeera English reporter, was there. At some point, Wael Al-Dahduh was supposed to be there as well, but he couldn't travel. And what astounded me is that it was as if there were rock stars in town, right? There were people, not from the journalism community, who had just heard, and they basically I've got pictures of people with posters saying, Yumna and Wael, we love you. Almost like as if they were rock stars, which tell you that there is a different way of doing journalism. And I think this is why I've been saying that I think that the very concept of journalism is being reframed in Gaza, and is being reframed in the way that we can accord quality to journalism that is done from within communities. Everything, all the philosophical underpinnings of journalism should be reevaluated and reestablished and relearned. Absolutely. But is that going to be enough to only come from the global south? It has to be a global phenomenon. It has to be a global phenomenon. It shouldn't be something that, some guy in New York decided that that's how you should write a story. So I think that absolutely that definitely is a role. But what I'm struck by also is, I travel a lot for work. And what I find, I sometimes feel almost like I'm navigating schizophrenic spaces sometimes, right? Because even the idea of what is happening in Gaza so markedly differs in the South compared to Europe, for example. The tone of discussions are so markedly different. And it's really, to a large part, because of the type of media that's being consumed in different spaces. A new report, I think it was The Intercept a couple of weeks ago, who showed that it was a small case study, 1,500 people who mostly consumed their news online, and 1,500 people who mostly consumed the news on cable televisions, US-centric. And they basically tested, their views about Gaza. And what came out was that people who consumed the news more online are more likely to think what is happening is a genocide, compared to those that are consuming news on cable television. So you're having all of these fractures, right? And so you understand how important media is in defining reality. Obviously, us in the global south have a huge part to play. But then I'm also struck by the fact that a lot of my colleagues working in big newsrooms in the north right now are out of jobs because they have questioned the editorial policy of their newsrooms, or they are basically not trusted to tell a story about this because they are deemed not to be objective enough.